I never imagined that offering a stranger a ride on a cold, rainy night would end up putting my entire future on the line. But that's exactly what happened. When I pulled over to help that stranded woman, I thought I was just doing what any decent person would do. I had no idea she was the judge who would later decide whether I kept custody of my son. And honestly, I still can't figure out whether what happened afterward was fate, karma, or some twisted test I didn't know I was taking. So I need you to listen to what happened and tell me honestly, was I wrong for how I handled everything? Or would you have done exactly what I did? That night started out like any other. I was driving home from a late shift, exhausted, broke, stressed about bills, and thinking about how I would scrape together enough money for my son's school trip. I didn't have anything left to give, but I kept telling myself I'd find a way somehow. I always did. Being a single dad means you learn to live in survival mode. You patch things up with duct tape, you make food stretch longer than it should, and you pretend everything is fine so your kid doesn't see the cracks forming. But then I saw her standing in the pouring rain, shivering next to a stalled car. With its hazards barely blinking, I almost drove past. I really did. Not because I didn't want to help, but because the world has taught me that people like me, tired, unshaven, driving an old pickup, are often seen as threats, not helpers. But something in me said, if that were someone helping your kid or your sister, you'd want them to stop. So I pulled over, rolled down my window, and asked if she needed help. Her voice was shaky but polite. She said her phone had died, her car wouldn't start, and she'd been waiting for almost an hour for roadside assistance. She looked like she'd come straight from a business meeting neat suit. Expensive coat, the kind of posture that tells you someone is used to being in control. But in that moment, she looked small and scared. I told her I could give her a ride to the nearest gas station where she could call for help. She hesitated, obviously nervous, but the rain was coming down harder, and honestly, she didn't have many options. She got in the truck cautiously, clutching her bag like it was a lifeline. I tried to make small talk, but she wasn't saying much. I mentioned my son, just to make things feel normal, and she seemed to relax just a little. When we got to the gas station, she thanked me, said she would call for a tow, and I drove home thinking that was the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, I found myself sitting in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and nervous sweat, trying to hold myself together because this hearing would determine if I kept custody of my son. My ex had decided she wanted full custody out of nowhere. She said I wasn't financially stable. She said living with me wasn't ideal. She said I wasn't providing the same lifestyle she could give him. And she wasn't wrong. I didn't have money, I didn't have a big place, and sometimes I was so exhausted from work that dinner was instant ramen. But I loved my son. I loved him more than anything. Losing him would break me. I sat there waiting for the judge to walk in, praying under my breath, squeezing my son's little drawing he'd made for me, a messy little picture of me holding his hand with the words, "Dad is my hero." And then the door opened, everyone stood up, and my heart nearly stopped when I realized the judge walking in was the same woman. I'd driven to the gas station. She recognized me instantly. I could see it in the slight widening of her eyes, the almost invisible flicker of surprise before she composed herself. I panicked internally. I thought she might think I had followed her, or that I was trying to manipulate her by appearing in her courtroom. What were the odds? What story would she believe? I felt like the room was spinning. I couldn't tell if this was going to work in my favor or destroy me. I kept my head down, praying she wouldn't call attention to it. The hearing began, and my ex's lawyer went in hard. He talked about my low income, my long work hours, my small apartment. He said that although I was a caring father, I couldn't provide the structure or financial comfort their client could. He made it sound like being poor meant I was incompetent, that being tired meant I didn't love my kid enough. My ex sat there with a smug expression like she had already won. When it was my turn to speak, my voice cracked. I told the truth. I told the judge I wasn't perfect, that I worked too many hours, slept too little, and worried constantly. But I also told her about every school project I stayed up helping with, every night I held my son when he had nightmares, every promise I kept, every moment I tried to make him feel safe, even when life felt impossible. I told her that even if I didn't have a lot, I gave him everything I had. I could feel her watching me carefully, but I couldn't read her. And that terrified me. After the hearing, she said she would give her decision in a few days. I went home feeling sick. Those days dragged on like years. Then one morning, I got a call that changed everything. The judge wanted to speak with me. Privately at her office. I'd never heard of that happening before. I went there shaking, convinced something was terribly wrong. When I walked in, she wasn't wearing the robe or the stern expression she had in court. She looked calmer, more human. She gestured for me to sit, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then she told me she remembered me from that night, that she hadn't said anything in court because it wouldn't have been appropriate. She told me she had been terrified that evening and that my kindness had made her feel safe. She said most people had driven past her, and she'd been shivering and scared until I stopped. Then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "I saw how you spoke about your son in the truck. You didn't know who I was, and you had no reason to impress me." That sincerity stayed with me. And in court, I saw the same love in your words. I needed to make sure it wasn't a coincidence. I didn't know what to say. Everything inside me felt like it was unraveling. She opened a folder on her desk, and I could see the decision she had prepared. And then she told me that while financial stability mattered, emotional stability mattered more. Love mattered more. Presence mattered more. She said she believed my son was safe and loved with me, and she was ruling in favor of joint custody with primary physical custody staying with me. I swear, in that moment I couldn't hold back the tears. I tried, but they came anyway. I thanked her over and over, stumbling over my words. But then something unexpected happened. She asked me a question. She said, "Why didn't you tell me the night we met, that you recognized me?" I told her the truth. I said I didn't want it to look like I wanted something from her. I didn't want that act of kindness to be twisted or cheapened. I said I wasn't raised to use people. She nodded slowly, like that meant more to her than she let on. On the drive home, I kept thinking about all the moments in my life when things had gone wrong, when the world had felt heavy and unfair and stacked against me. And then I thought about that night in the rain, how I almost drove past her, how I almost chose fear and exhaustion over humanity. And I wondered how different my life would look right now if I had kept driving. Would I still have my son? Would I have lost everything? It makes you think about how small decisions ripple outward in ways you never see coming. So that was the situation I found myself in. Broke, exhausted, fighting for my son, and unknowingly helping the one person who had the power to decide our future. And before I tell you what happened after the ruling, I want you to seriously pause and think. If you were in my shoes, would you have stopped to help that night? Would you have taken the risk? Comment below what you honestly would have done, because I need to know if I'm crazy or if that moment was just fate stepping in at the right time. After the ruling, my ex was furious. She called me yelling, saying the judge must have been biased, that something wasn't fair, that she would appeal. But I wasn't scared anymore. For once, I felt like the world had given me a fighting chance. And the judge's decision didn't magically fix my life. I was still broke, still tired, still working multiple shifts, but suddenly everything felt lighter. My son hugged me tighter that night. He said he knew I wouldn't lose him. He said he always believed I'd find a way. A few weeks later, when things had calmed down, I got a letter. It was from the judge. Inside was a short note thanking me again for stopping that night, and saying she hoped life would continue to get better for me and my son. And tucked behind the letter was a gift card to a grocery store. Not a huge one. Not something extravagant, just enough to make life a little easier. She had written at the bottom, "This is not from a judge. This is from a mother who understands." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Life didn't magically turn perfect after that, but I started feeling hope again. Real hope. I picked up extra hours, saved bit by bit, and eventually moved us into a slightly better place. My son started making more friends, doing better in school, smiling more. And every time I felt overwhelmed, I reminded myself of that rainy night, and how doing the right thing when no one is watching can change everything. So that's my story. The story of how helping a stranger ended up saving my family. And I want to leave you with this. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness, not done for reward, not done for recognition, just done because it's the right thing, can come back to you in ways you never expect. And if you've ever wondered whether your choices matter, trust me, they do. More than you know, if you were on my side, like this video. If you want more stories just like this one, make sure to subscribe. And definitely let me know in the comments what you think about all of this. Was it fate, luck, or just a strange twist of life? I'll see you all in the next story.